Imagine standing on a smoke-choked beach in the year 404 BC. Behind you, the sky glows a hellish orange as hundreds of once-proud warships are systematically consumed by flames. In the distance, the sound of flutes plays a mocking, upbeat tune as soldiers tear down the massive stone walls of Athens. For nearly 30 years, the Greek world has been locked in a brutal, exhausting civil war. When you think of the Peloponnesian War, you probably picture dusty plains, heavy bronze shields, and Spartan hoplites marching in an unbreakable phalanx. But that is only half the story, and not even the half that decided the war. In antiquity, this clash was described as a fight between an elephant and a whale. Sparta was the elephant, unstoppable on land, crushing everything in its path. Athens was the whale, the uncontested master of the deep blue seas. To win, the Spartans couldn't just fight on land. They had to plunge into the wet abyss. They had to learn how to build a navy from scratch, find a way to fund it, and hunt down the whale in its own domain. This is the story of the forgotten naval side of the Peloponnesian War. The Silver Engine. To understand how Athens became a maritime superpower, we have to travel underground into the dark, suffocating silver mines of Laurion. Here, thousands of enslaved laborers worked in narrow, claustrophobic shafts under brutal conditions. In the year 483 BC, a spectacular, incredibly rich vein of silver was discovered. Naturally, the citizens of Athens wanted to distribute this newfound wealth as individual cash payouts. But one visionary politician, Themistocles, had a different plan. He saw a rising storm on the horizon. The Persian Empire was preparing to invade. Themistocles convinced the assembly to forfeit their payouts and invest every ounce of silver into building a state-of-the-art fleet of 200 warships called triremes. 3 years later, those very ships smashed the Persian navy at the Battle of Salamis, saving Greece. This sudden windfall didn't just win a war, it transformed Athens into an empire. They formed the Delian League, a voluntary alliance of Greek island states that slowly morphed into a forced Athenian hegemony. To make themselves completely invulnerable to land siege, the Athenians did something extraordinary. They built the long walls, 2 massive stone corridors connecting their city directly to the harbor of Piraeus. Even if an army surrounded Athens on land, the city was functionally an island. As long as their ships could sail, they could import food from the Black Sea, completely ignoring the enemy outside their gates. But what was this legendary ship, the Trireme? Picture a sleek wooden vessel, about 37 meters long and only 5 meters wide. It was incredibly light and sat shallow in the water. This ship wasn't designed to carry cargo or heavy troops. It was a guided missile. At its bow sat a massive bronze-clad ram, projecting at the waterline, designed to punch a lethal hole straight through an enemy ship's wooden hull. The engine of this missile was entirely human. Inside the cramped, humid, and sweat-soaked hull sat 170 rowers, arranged in 3 tightly packed, staggered tiers on each side. This design created a fascinating political side effect. Traditional hoplite warfare required wealthy citizens who could afford expensive bronze armor. But the Navy relied on the Thetes, the poorest, landless class of citizens who pulled the oars. Every time Athens deployed its fleet, it was empowering its working class. The Navy and radical Athenian democracy became one and the same. Geometric warfare. To understand ancient naval battles, you have to throw out everything you know about Hollywood sea battles. There was no gunpowder, no cannons, and very little boarding. Instead, sea battles were a high-speed, deadly game of geometry and raw human coordination. Imagine the sound inside a trireme during an advance. The Greeks had specific names for the sounds of rowing. There was the deep, rhythmic thud of the oars striking the water, what they called the Pylos. This was immediately followed by the rushing surge of the water as the ship propelled forward, the Rothios. To a spectator on the shore, the rhythmic whoomp-whoosh sounded like the heartbeat of a mechanical giant. As the ship accelerated, the steering oars and the bronze ram hissed through the water like snakes. The boatswain yelled out commands, and the shrill notes of pipes kept all 170 oars moving in perfect, synchronized harmony. Commanders relied on three primary tactical maneuvers to destroy their enemies. The first was the Diekplous, which translates to sailing through. A column of Athenian ships would charge directly at the enemy line, aim for the gaps between the ships, and at the very last second, pull in their own oars. The charging ship would slide past the enemy, snapping their oars like toothpicks, leaving them completely crippled and stationary in the water. Then, the attacker would wheel around and ram the helpless vessel in its vulnerable rear or side. The second tactic was the Periplous, an outflanking maneuver. Fast Athenian ships would use their superior speed to sail around the enemy's flanks, encircling them and striking them from behind. If a fleet was slower, outnumbered, or untrained, they had to resort to the Kyklos, or the hedgehog. The ships would form a massive, defensive circle, with their prows and bronze rams facing outward, placing their support ships and best captains in the center to plug any leaks. But a circle is static, and in naval warfare, if you stop moving, you are already dead. Phormio's Masterclasses. In the early years of the war, Sparta and its allies quickly realized that confronting Athenian seamanship was suicide, but they had to try. In 429 BC, the Spartan-led alliance launched a massive campaign to break the Athenian blockade at the mouth of the Corinthian Gulf. Standing in their way was a single Athenian admiral named Phormio, stationed at the strategic port of Naupactus with only 20 triremes. The Peloponnesians assembled a massive fleet of 47 warships. They had the numbers, but many of their ships were heavy, laden down with soldiers and military supplies. They didn't want to fight a sea battle. They just wanted to cross the Gulf. When they saw Phormio's 20 sleek ships shadowing them, the Peloponnesians panicked and formed a defensive Kyklos, a massive, tight circle with their rams facing outward. Phormio executed a brilliant psychological maneuver. He didn't charge. Instead, he ordered his 20 ships to form a single-file line and sail in continuous, tightening circles around the static enemy ring. The Athenians brushed past the enemy prows, repeatedly feigning immediate ramming attacks but holding back on Phormio's strict orders. This terrifying, high-speed circling forced the Peloponnesian captains to back up, contracting their circle closer and closer to avoid being isolated and rammed. Phormio was playing a waiting game. He knew the local weather. He was waiting for the morning wind that regularly blew outward from the Gulf. Suddenly, the wind rose, churning the water into choppy waves. The static Peloponnesian ships, packed tightly together, began to toss and drift. Inexperienced rowers struggled to manage their oars in the rough swells. Ships began colliding with one another, the air filled with absolute pandemonium. The grinding of wood, the shouting of men trying to push off colliding vessels with long poles, and the screams of officers trying to restore order, entirely drowning out the boatswain's calls. Seeing the enemy in complete helpless chaos, Phormio blew the battle trumpet. The 20 Athenian triremes surged forward, systematically ramming and disabling the helpless fleet. They captured 12 enemy ships and routed the rest. Humiliated, Sparta sent naval advisors, including the aggressive and legendary General Brasidas, to regroup and raise a massive fleet of 77 ships. They cornered Phormio's 20 triremes inside the narrow waters of the Gulf. The Peloponnesians executed a sudden ambush, cutting off the Athenian line of retreat and driving 9 Athenian triremes ashore. The remaining 11 Athenian ships fled eastward toward Naupactus, pursued by the fast-sailing right wing of the Peloponnesian fleet, who were already celebrating their victory. As the lead Athenian vessel reached the safety of Naupactus, its captain executed one of the most celebrated maneuvers in naval history. Using an anchored merchant ship as a pivoting post, the Athenian trireme swung 180 degrees around the obstacle and rammed the pursuing Leucadian flagship directly in its exposed side, sinking it instantly. This sudden display of masterful seamanship shocked the pursuers. Slower Peloponnesian ships stopped rowing, dropping their oars, while others ran onto shallow reefs in their confusion. The remaining 10 Athenian ships pivoted and launched a ferocious counterattack. They recaptured all but one of their grounded ships, seized 6 enemy vessels, and preserved their control of the Gulf. To recover their lost prestige, the Peloponnesian leadership even tried a desperate surprise land and sea raid targeting Athens' home port, the Piraeus. Though the raid failed, the message was clear. Sparta was starting to realize that the war could only be won by threatening Athens' maritime heartland. The Persian Gold Rush. For over a decade, Athens maintained its iron grip on the seas. But in 413 BC, everything changed. Athens launched a massive, hubristic expedition to invade Sicily, targeting the powerful city of Syracuse. It ended in the single greatest military catastrophe in classical history. Athens lost nearly 200 ships and thousands of experienced sailors who were executed or left to rot in the stone quarries of Sicily. Suddenly, the whale was bleeding, and its navy was largely gone. Sparta saw its golden opportunity to win the war once and for all. But they had a massive problem. They had no money. Building and maintaining a navy of triremes was ruinously expensive. Sailors needed regular, daily pay. To solve this, Sparta made a deal with the devil. They turned to their traditional, mortal enemy, the Persian Empire, which was eager to see Athens fall. Through 3 successive, highly controversial treaties between 412 and 411 BC, Sparta secured Persian funding. In exchange for gold to build their ships and pay their sailors, the Spartans did something unthinkable. They abandoned the freedom of the Greek cities of Asia Minor, effectively surrendering them back to Persian rule. To avoid public outrage, the Spartans kept these treaties highly secretive. But this alliance was built on sand and mutual distrust. The Persian satrap, Tissaphernes, frequently delayed payments and reduced the sailors' wages to half a drachma. He was being whispered to by the exiled Athenian general Alcibiades, who convinced him that it was in Persia's interest to let the Greek city-states exhaust each other, rather than letting Sparta win a decisive victory. Even so, the Persian gold rush had begun. With a funded Spartan fleet on the horizon, the war shifted to its final, most desperate phase, the battle for the Hellespont. The Hellespont lifeline and the ambush at Cyzicus. Because Sparta's land garrison at Decilia blocked all agricultural access to Attica, Athens was entirely dependent on grain imports from the Black Sea. If the Spartans could seize control of the Hellespont, the narrow strait of the Dardanelles, they could starve Athens into submission. In 410 BC, the Spartan admiral Mindarus assembled a massive fleet of of 60 to 80 triremes. Supported by the Persian land army of Pharnabazus, Mindarus besieged and captured the strategic city of Cyzicus, threatening to seal the grain trade route permanently. The Athenian commanders, Alcibiades, Thrasybulus, and Trireme, consolidated their scattered squadrons into a unified fleet of 86 triremes. They entered the Hellespont under the cover of night, slipping past the primary Spartan base at Abydos to hide their numbers. The next morning, under heavy rain and thick mist, Alcibiades led a decoy squadron of just 20 triremes directly towards Cyzicus. Mindarus saw this tiny, isolated Athenian force and took the bait. He sailed out with his entire fleet to crush them. As the Spartan fleet drew further into open water, Alcibiades' squadron turned and feigned a desperate retreat, leading the Spartans miles away from the safety of their harbor. Once they were sufficiently isolated, Alcibiades ordered his ships to pivot and face the pursuers. At that exact moment, Thrasybulus and Thrasybulus emerged from the mist with their flanking squadrons, closing the trap and cutting off Mindarus' line of retreat. Realizing he was trapped, Mindarus directed his ships toward a beach south of Cyzicus, where the Persian satrap Pharnabazus' land troops stood ready to protect them. The naval engagement quickly escalated into a brutal, chaotic, amphibious assault. Alcibiades landed his marines directly on the beach, using grappling hooks to drag the stranded Spartan triremes back into the water. Pharnabazus' numerically superior land forces drove the Athenians back toward their ships. To relieve the pressure, Thrasybulus landed his forces to create a diversion, while Thrasybulus combined his troops with a land force under Chereas to launch a massive combined assault. The Spartan and Persian lines broke. Mindarus was killed in the hand-to-hand fighting on the beach, and the entire Spartan fleet was captured or destroyed. The next day, the Athenians intercepted a brief, famous dispatch sent by the surviving Spartan vice-admiral to Sparta. It read, "The ships are gone. Mindarus is dead. The men are starving. We know not what to do." This spectacular victory temporarily restored Athenian control of the Hellespont and restored full democracy in Athens. To fund their ongoing operations, they built a custom fort at Chrysopolis, levying a 10% tax on all ships coming from the Black Sea. Confident in their resurgence, the Athenians rejected a Spartan peace offer, determined to press the war to a definitive conclusion: the trial of the Nike. But the war of attrition continued. By 406 BC, Athens was once again in a desperate situation. The newly appointed Spartan admiral, Callicratidas, trapped the Athenian fleet under Conon at Mytilene, destroying 30 Athenian ships and blockading the remaining 40 by land and sea. Athens had no reserve fleet and no money. In a state of absolute emergency, the assembly voted to melt down the golden Nike statues from the Acropolis to mint emergency coins. To find manpower, they did something unprecedented. They drafted every available man, free citizens, foreign residents, and thousands of enslaved people, offering them full citizenship in exchange for service on the rowing benches. Within 30 days, this desperate mobilization produced a scratch fleet of 110 triremes. Joined by allied ships, this raw, inexperienced force of 155 vessels sailed to relieve the blockade. They met Callicratidas' 120 highly trained, professional Spartan warships near the Arginusae Islands. Knowing their raw crews could not perform or defend against the complex Diekplous maneuver, the Athenian generals implemented a brilliant tactical innovation. Instead of the traditional single line, the Athenians deployed in a massive double-line formation, divided into 8 autonomous divisions. If a fast Spartan ship tried to execute a Diekplous by sailing through a gap in the first Athenian line, a ship from the second line stood ready to pivot and ram the attacker in the side. The battle was fierce, but the double-line tactic worked. Callicratides's flagship rammed an Athenian vessel, but the impact threw the Spartan commander into the water, where he drowned. The Spartan right wing collapsed, and they lost 70 ships, while the Athenians lost only 25. It was a spectacular victory, but then tragedy struck. Following the victory, the generals planned to leave a detachment under the commanders Thrasybulus and Trireme to rescue survivors clinging to the wrecks of the 25 disabled Athenian triremes, while the rest of the fleet sailed to relieve Konon. But before either mission could be executed, a sudden, violent summer storm swept across the Aegean. The high winds and heavy seas forced all ships back to port, making rescues impossible. Thousands of shipwrecked Athenian sailors drowned. When the news reached Athens, the public joy turned to profound grief and anger. The family festival of the Apaturia, where clans gathered to register new citizens, amplified the loss as the empty places of the drowned sailors were deeply felt. In a highly charged, emotionally driven assembly meeting, a politician named Calixenus proposed a collective, immediate vote on the guilt or innocence of all 8 generals, completely bypassing the constitutional requirement for individual trials. The philosopher Socrates, who happened to be serving as the presiding officer of the assembly that day, stood alone in refusing to put the illegal, unconstitutional motion to a vote. But his resistance was bypassed through parliamentary maneuvering. The assembly voted the generals guilty. The 6 commanders who had returned to Athens, including the son of the great statesman Pericles, were executed. This was a catastrophic, self-inflicted blow to Athenian military leadership. By executing their most successful commanders, the Athenian democracy signaled to its officers that tactical success offered no protection against political persecution. They had destroyed their own institutional trust, setting the stage for the fatal era to come. The end of the Whale. The stage was now set for the final, tragic act of the war. Enter Lysander, a unique figure in Spartan society. Born to a Spartan father and a non-Spartan mother, Lysander had risen through the strict educational system through sheer talent and ruthless ambition. Lysander cultivated a close personal friendship with the ambitious young Persian prince Cyrus the Younger, who gave Lysander the revenues of all his wealthy cities in Asia Minor. With this unlimited funding, Lysander rebuilt the Spartan fleet and increased rowers' wages, allowing him to recruit experienced rowers directly from the Athenian fleet. In 405 BC, Lysander seized the highly strategic town of Lampsacus on the Hellespont, opening the way to the Bosporus and threatening to starve Athens. The Athenian fleet of 180 triremes rushed to contain him, establishing a camp at Aegospotami, an open beach directly across the channel from Lampsacus. The location was logistically terrible. It lacked a harbor and any nearby food supplies, forcing the Athenian sailors to walk nearly 2.5 kilometers to Sestos every day just to secure provisions. For 4 consecutive days, the Athenians sailed out in battle formation to challenge Lysander. Each day, the Spartan admiral kept his ships prepared inside the secure harbor but refused to fight, carefully observing the Athenians' patterns. When the Athenians returned to their beach, their crews scattered inland to forage for food. The exiled Athenian general Alcibiades, observing this from his nearby castle, rowed down to the beach to warn the commanders. He urged them to relocate the fleet to the secure harbor of Sestos. The arrogant generals dismissed his advice, telling him that they were in command now, not him. On the fifth day, the Athenians offered battle and returned to their camp as usual. As the sailors scattered to find food, Lysander launched his attack. According to the historian Xenophon, Lysander's fleet sailed across the channel and captured most of the Athenian ships undefended on the beach with virtually no actual sea fighting. In another account, by Diodorus Siculus, a vanguard force was sent out as bait but was quickly defeated, catching the rest of the fleet completely unprepared. The result was a catastrophic disaster. Only 9 Athenian ships escaped, led by the general Conon. Lysander captured nearly the entire fleet and executed 3,000 Athenian prisoners on the beach. With no navy left to protect the grain imports, Athens was systematically starved into submission. In March 404 BC, the city finally surrendered. Epilogue: the shattered cradle. The Great War was over, but the victory was Pyrrhic. The 27-year naval struggle had completely exhausted both major powers. By dismantling the Athenian maritime system and depleting their own resources, the Greek city-states were left highly vulnerable, paving the way for the rise of Macedon under Philip II and Alexander the Great. Ultimately, the naval theater of the Peloponnesian War proves that ancient conflicts were decided not by the physical bravery of a single hoplite class, but by the complex interplay of geology, state finance, maritime technology, and tactical adaptability. The loss of these naval resources marked the end of the Golden Age of Greece, proving that the true center of gravity was always located in the deep, wet abyss of the Aegean. For more content like this, click that subscribe button to get notified when we upload a new video. We have a whole lot of new titles in prep to expand your history knowledge. Our goal is to bring you history on a simple plate to help you understand the past in short but comprehensive form. Until next time, my friend.